Two looming leadership ballots, one surprise defection, a ministry shake-up and a new pope. I'm Olivia Caisley, live from the lands of the Ngunnawal people. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing. The knives are out inside the Liberals and tensions are at an all-time high as the party's deputy Susan Lee throws her hat in the ring for the leadership, acknowledging the coalition has let the women of Australia down. But does she have the support to win a looming showdown with Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor? We'll ask Liberal MP Andrew Wallace in just a moment. A hero's welcome for Anthony Albanese and a frontbench shake-up as factional heavyweights within the party flex their muscles. With the ministerial pool now rubber-stamped by caucus, the PM will allocate portfolios and those snubbed will have to ride out the ugliness of internal politics as Labor basks in the glory of a stunning win. So why were Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus and Science Minister Ed Husic dumped from the frontbench? We're joined by Labor's Mark Butler in just a moment. He's 69, multilingual and now the most powerful figure in the Catholic Church. Pope Leo is the first American ever elected to the papacy and a friend of the late Pope Francis. A global pope for a global church, the PM this morning hailing the pontiff's election as a momentous day. Anthony Albanese has joined world leaders in congratulating Pope Leo XIV after his election as the first North American to lead the Catholic Church. The Prime Minister says Australia will invite the Pope to visit in 2028 for the International Eucharistic Congress.
Today is a momentous day for Catholics right around the world, and for the faithful here in Australia, it is an important day, and I join them in congratulating the Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, Bishop of Rome, on his election overnight. As the first North American Pope, Pope Leo XIV's leadership comes at an important time for the Catholic Church and for the world. My government looks forward to continuing Australia's strong relationship with the Holy See under Pope Leo XIV's pontificate.
The race is on for the Liberal Party leadership, with Angus Taylor officially announcing he'll make a run against Susan Lee for the top job.
Australians want more than opposition. They want a real alternative, one that understands them, one that earns back their trust. I'm standing for leader to make sure we're ready. Let's regroup, rebuild and get back in the fight.
Taylor served as Shadow Treasurer under Peter Dutton, while Susan Lee was Dutton's deputy. She says the party needs to reflect modern Australia and reconnect with women.
I'm determined and convinced that I am the right person to lead the party forward at this time. And I think my appointment would send a strong signal to the women of Australia, but it's about much more than that. It is about the policy offering. It is about what modern Australia expects of us as Liberals. It is about working collegiately across our party, and it is about a strong work ethic, something that I'm known for in our party and in our country. And I'm not going to take a backward step. We can be successful, we can win the next election, and this is a moment to look forward and really bring the Australian people with us on this journey.
And in breaking news, Queensland National Senator Matt Canavan has confirmed he's challenging incumbent David Littleproud for the leadership of the Nationals Party. He will make the challenge at a party room meeting in Canberra on Monday. At the moment, the Liberals and the Nationals are jostling over key positions in the wake of their election defeat, but Labor's moved swiftly to lock in its refreshed frontbench, with caucus meeting today to finalise the pool of people from which the new ministry will be formed. Health, as we know, was front and centre in Labor's re-election pitch, the Prime Minister brandishing that green and gold Medicare card at almost every turn. Now, fresh off Labor's landslide victory, we're joined today by Health Minister Mark Butler, who joins us now.
For the time being, Liv, Health Minister. We'll see what the Prime Minister does over the weekend. Well,
we'll get to that in just a moment. Could I just get your reaction, though, just to that breaking news? So we've just heard there that a National Senator, Matt Canavan, is going to make a tilt for the leadership of the Nationals Party. Just a couple of days ago, in fact, yesterday, we heard that Jacinta Nampijinpa Price is also going to be leaving the Nationals for the Liberals. What's your view on this?
Well, they're jostling for positions, I think, instead of really having an honest just look at the platform they took to the Australian people. I mean, the Liberal Party is the main game, not the Nationals, with the greatest respect to them. And in Angus Taylor and Susan Lee, you have Hobson's choice. I mean, Angus Taylor was the guy who took to the election a few days ago the idea that a Liberal government of all would increase the tax rates of every single taxpayer in the country. He wanted to cut tens and tens of billions of dollars of crucial services like Medicare to pay for nuclear power. Susan Lee, on the other hand, is not the worst health minister in the history of Medicare. That was Peter Dutton, but she's the second worst health minister in the history of Medicare. Neither of them offer a path forward for their party, let alone for the country.
Okay, so we're seeing jostling within the coalition, but we've seen factional jostling, at least, within the Labor Party just today. What do you make of this factional push, really, to remove both Mark Dreyfus and Ed Husic from the ministry? Your faction, the left, doesn't really do this, does it?
Well, it's a tough day for Ed and for Mark. I've worked with both of them for many years. I know them well. I have a great deal of respect and affection for them. It's a tough day for their staff, for their families, for their friends. But we go through a democratic process in the Labor Party. We have for many, many decades. We had a short time where Kevin Rudd tried a system of selecting the ministry himself. That didn't really take to the Labor Party, and we've returned to the tradition. Every person who wants to serve in the ministry, including me, has had over the last 36 hours to front up to meetings of their colleagues and seek their support. And that can have some consequences that are tough, that are painful, and that's certainly the case for Mark and for Ed. But, you know, what we saw today was an incredibly exciting, energetic caucus. I mean, if your viewers look at that imagery, they will see a reflection of the country. You know, more than 50% women, every faith, every ethnicity you can think of represented there. Very young people to people of more seasoned ages like myself, but also a caucus that really understands the awesome responsibility the Australian people gave us, the responsibility we now have to deliver what we promised.
A fair point there around diversity in Labor's ranks, especially the big proportion of women in the caucus. But on this question of representation, what does it say to have removed a senior, a Jewish minister, and also a Muslim MP, a senior one at that, especially when their constituents might have, I guess, be bitterly disappointed by this outcome?
And they will. Supporters of Mark and of Ed will be bitterly disappointed by this outcome. It's a democratic outcome. You know, the people voted on Saturday. We're going through our own democratic processes. They sometimes have really tough consequences. We have a number of Jewish members of our caucus. I see speculation that Anne Ali might be promoted to cabinet, the first Muslim woman in the history of Australia to be a cabinet minister, if that's what the Prime Minister decides. So we have this incredible well of talent and diversity and different life experience to draw on. Your viewers will have seen that through the imagery of the really energetic, exciting caucus meeting we had today.
But do you agree, though, that it could put a bit of a dampener on what's been a very bright week for Labor after its landslide win? Can you understand why some voters would be disappointed?
Well, some supporters of Mark and Ed will be, there's no question about that, but that's what the democratic process throws up. You know, we have 120 members of this caucus, the largest party room Labor's ever had. Every single one of them was entitled to put their hand up, but every single one of them was entitled to indicate a view about how who they thought should go into the 30-member ministry. There inevitably in these cases is a bit of turnover, a bit of renewal. We want to balance that with stability and experience, but we have a lot of talent, a number of people who could have been ministers, who could be ministers, but weren't able to fit into 30 spots.
I understand that you say this is part of the democratic process, but we've seen former Prime Minister Paul Keating describing this as an act of factional thuggery. What do you make of those remarks or that assessment?
I just don't agree with Mr Keating about that. I mean, he was a long creature of this process in the party, a very hardened creature of the New South Wales right himself. He makes the point in his statement about the rivalry between the New South Wales and the Victorian right. I mean, that is just part of the long tradition of the Labor Party. We go through our processes. Everyone is entitled to stand. Everyone is entitled to cast a vote. And sometimes the result of that is tough on people, and I know that's been tough on Ed and Mark and their supporters today.
Moving on, you've served, I should say, as Health Minister for the past 3 years. Are you still happy having oversight of this portfolio, or are you feeling like it's time for a change?
Look, I love this portfolio. I served for 4 years as a junior health minister under Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard under the leadership of Nicola Roxon, who was just a terrific health minister. And I will do whatever the Prime Minister wants. Ultimately, he has earned the right to determine the shape and the nature of his second-term government, and I'd be happy to serve whatever judgment he makes.
Okay, I checked your website. It says Mark holds a first-class honours law degree, an arts degree and a master's degree in international relations. How do you feel about taking on the role of Attorney-General? Is that something you'd put your hand up for?
As I said, I do whatever the Prime Minister wants. We have a big agenda to deliver in health. We have a big agenda to deliver in aged care as well. There are many people in that 30-member ministry the caucus elected today who could do those jobs, but I've loved my time in health. I've now done 7 years in the portfolio between the 2 times in government. If the Prime Minister were to give me more time in health, I would be enormously grateful, but I will do whatever he asks me to do, and I'll do it humbly.
You spent the campaign going after former opposition leader Peter Dutton's record on health. If Susan Lee is to become leader of the Liberal Party, will she get the same treatment from you guys?
Well, what I said at the time was I thought I was entitled to point out the record of Peter Dutton as Health Minister, a record he never walked away from. And it was a shocking record to try to abolish bulk billing, to try to introduce fees for people to go to emergency departments. Susan Lee, in her time as Health Minister, never once increased the Medicare rebate. It was frozen during her entire time as the Health Minister, and it is part of the reason why bulk billing was in free fall when we came to government. Now, I don't think she's the worst Health Minister in the history of Medicare. That is Peter Dutton, and that was the vote of Australia's doctors, but I do think Susan Lee was the second worst.
I just lastly wanted to ask you, we're seeing a lot of infighting within the Nationals, just with that breaking news at the top of this show, but also within the Liberal Party too. Is that sort of internal turmoil, I guess, guaranteeing that Labor will have a third term of government?
No, I don't think it does. I think they're in a bad way. I don't think they listened to the conclusions of their 2022 election review, which is a significant part of the reason why they are in the position they are now. But we know we can't take anything for granted. Politics moves very quickly nowadays, and we will be judged not on so much on what Angus Taylor or Susan Lee do, but on whether we deliver what we promised the Australian people we would do over the last 6 weeks. And from the Prime Minister to the most junior, newest member of the caucus, we are utterly determined to do that.
And just a reflection finally on the result on Saturday. How are you feeling after what really was a landslide, I should say, for Labor?
Well, first of all, humble and a bit overwhelmed by the responsibility, but I can't say that we weren't pretty overjoyed by it. I mean, it was an historic result, and for the first time I think I can remember, the Labor Party was overwhelmingly endorsed in every state and territory. I mean, our spread across the country, the attraction of the platform that Anthony Albanese took to the Australian people was deep and it was broad, and I think it really is a good platform for us to do a lot of good things over these next 3 years. But we take nothing for granted. We recognise our responsibility is to deliver what we promised the Australian people we would deliver, and we're determined to do that.
Mark Butler, Health Minister for now, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Liv.
In a shock to many, the government's only Muslim MP in the cabinet has been demoted amid a factional carve-up of 30 frontbench positions. Ed Husic was one of 2 casualties of the reshuffle, a move heavily criticised by former Prime Minister Paul Keating, who labelled it a showing of poor judgment and diminished respect. The Lebanese Muslim Association says the move sends the wrong sort of signals and doesn't reward the loyalty of Muslim voters who stuck with Labor, particularly in Western Sydney. Muslim community leader Mr Jamal Rifi joins us now. Dr Rifi, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
You've called Ed Husic a powerful representative for the Muslim community. What message does his exclusion from the ministry send to your community, especially in this moment?
Mr. Husic is a very successful minister. He ticks all the boxes. Unfortunately, he's dumping from the cabinet and front bench it sends the wrong message to his constituent and also to the community he represents.
And have you had a chance to speak with him?
I didn't have the heart to do so. We're just waiting, and we are hoping that hopefully by next Tuesday things might change, because to be honest, for a Prime Minister who is having a thumping majority, for Ed Husic to pay the price of this thumping majority, it's very hard to take. The second, Prime Minister has got the power as a captain call to make that call right now. If he wants to reform Australia, our beloved Australia, he should start by reforming the archaic rules of the Labor Party that robbed a very effective minister from his position, and he hasn't been rewarded. As a matter of fact, he was given a very hard treatment by a Prime Minister that he should protect those ministers who are well performing. And Ed Husic, he performed very well in the last 3 years.
We've heard from you and other Muslim leaders that people are angry. As we know, the votes have already been cast and the Labor victory is complete. Where do you go from here, and what's your message to the Prime Minister? You spoke there about making a captain's call. Is that something you think he should do?
Absolutely. He definitely should do. I mean, we have a very dynamic community in the Australian Muslims community. A lot of our community members, they wanted to go out there to punish Labor. And we said, despite all the aches that's happening, we're not going to let our pain cloud our political judgment. We don't want to punish Labor at the expense of having Dutton back in government. Our aim was to work against Dutton, because the last thing that we want to see, that our future Prime Minister inviting a war criminal onto our shore. We worked very hard. We affected the community. We safeguarded those hard-working Labor ministers and Labor candidates in southwestern Sydney and also in Melbourne and across the state. For us to be rewarded for our hard work, dumping Ed Husic, it's actually hard to take, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm hearing hurt in your voice. Do you feel betrayed?
I know that someone will be in the cabinet and front bench, not based on his ethnic background or his religion, will be on his performance. Ed Husic ticks all the boxes. He is successful. He is loyal. He's done very well. And at the hard time, he worked even harder than anyone else. Unfortunately, after such a thumping majority, he will pay this price. It's really the Prime Minister needs to reflect on what sort of message he sent to all these people who worked very hard in southwestern Sydney.
So what happens from here? Let's say the Prime Minister doesn't make a captain's call. Does this decision mean that you would withdraw your support for Labor? And do you think Labor could see, I guess, votes dwindle from the Muslim community come election day in 3 years' time?
Look, to be honest, we are much more mature than that. We will definitely tap Ed Husic on the back and we work with him. But we also have other ministers that we can work within this government. There are a few things that they need to do, they have failed to do in the last 3 years. They cause a lot of heartache to members of their own cabinet. And it's about time to set the record straight. The Prime Minister knows what he needs to do. This country knows what needs to be done. And right now he's got such a majority, he's got a moral position and he should take it, and he knows what these decisions are going to be. We're not going to withdraw our support, because we have other ministers that we carry on with them, but we would have loved to have Ed Husic in the cabinet, because he also can be a voice for southwestern Sydney, and especially for his electorate and what he represents.
Jamal, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Greens leader Adam Bandt has conceded his seat of Melbourne, leaving the minor party without a leader. To discuss, who will steer the Greens through its next chapter with a diminished presence in the House of Representatives, but the balance of power in the upper house, is Greens Senator David Shoebridge, who joins us now. Thanks so much for speaking with us today. And now, Mr. Shoebridge, we've had a very busy week in politics. There's a lot been happening here, and we've seen the Greens lose their leader, Adam Bandt. How surprised were you by that outcome?
Well, obviously, we were all gutted by Adam losing his seat. He's been a terrific leader of our party room, incredibly consensus-driven, really getting an incredibly united team behind him and the platform we had. I think, we were worried about the redistribution, but I think the way the preferences flowed really made it really hard for Adam in a way we hadn't been fully expecting. And I think we're all, fair to say the movement is gutted by the loss of Adam. But, we're an incredibly united team. We share core values. And that team, the team that Adam has helped craft is incredibly united now. And we want to make sure we use the political power that, so many Australians gave us with the sole balance of power in the Senate to deliver on the platform.
Listening to Mr. Bandt yesterday when he was conceding, he did blame preference deals for the Greens' loss. Do you think he should have taken more responsibility for the broader electoral performance? I mean, after all, we have seen the Greens, especially in the lower house, reduced to just one seat, and even that electorate is also hanging in the balance.
Well, I think Adam did a great job. There were a whole lot of factors at play in this. And, it turns out that when you take on a structural reform package like we did, where you want to deliver economic justice against the likes of billionaires and for people who can't afford a home or can't go to the dentist, when you want to take on the fossil fuel industry because we want to make sure our kids have a safe planet, where you want to take on the property industry so that you can ensure that people have homes, it turns out you get a bunch of people opposing those kind of structural reforms. I mean, maybe that explains why Labor won't take on any of those vested interests, but we took them on all at once. And I think that was tough, right? And it turns out that those cashed up interests are very happy to work in deeply unprincipled ways at different times to attack any party that's willing to take them on. But of course we need to take on those interests because, climate isn't a political game. It's a game about physics and about the future of our planet. I think our package was incredibly well received. It was a bloody hard election to be trying to persuade people for those kinds of changes.
What do you make of these criticisms we've seen that the Greens' more sort of hardline stance on certain issues has resulted in a voter backlash or a decline in support in the polls? Do you see this as a moment for the Greens to, rethink its identity and approach to politics more broadly?
Well, of course, after every election, you have a review. Win, lose or draw, you have a review. But, when you see a genocide happening, you don't have a choice about trying to pretend it's not or trying to rewrite it. What do you do in the face of a genocide? Then everything in your power to stop a genocide. And that's what I think we did as a movement, and we connected with millions of Australians in that work. When you see a housing crisis, you don't pretend that a sort of half-baked gift to the property industry is going to get the millions of Australians homes that we desperately know they need. And when you see a climate crisis, well, you do everything you can to keep coal and gas in the ground, to stare down the fossil fuel industry and to do things like ending native logging. I mean, yes, we could have taken a much more watered down package to the election, but it wouldn't have been honest to the state of the challenges that we see Australia and the world has to face. And, I know a lot of people want to have a post-truth world and they want to pretend these things aren't real. But we engage in politics, I think, from a core of principle. And I think when you do that, yeah, you may have a tough election, but you absolutely build a platform of trust with a growing number of Australians, and especially young Australians.
Can you explain to our viewers what happens next for the Greens in terms of electing a new leader, and who are you going to back yourself?
Oh, well, you'll be surprised to know, Olivia. I'm not going to be announcing that on national TV. We have a process where the party room will come together next week to determine who our new leader will be. And, you know, that is a process that I expect to be collaborative and respectful, honest and frank. And I feel privileged to be in a party. I look at my colleagues, the breadth of talent and the breadth of skills in my colleagues, and I think we will have a strong future with a future leader. And Olivia, I can make this announcement. It won't be me. I won't be putting my hand up to be the party leader.
Okay, well, thank you for that detail. Labor worked pretty hard to paint the Greens as wreckers. How do you think whoever does win that leadership ballot should try and shift that perception? I mean, looking back, do you think, I guess, blocking some of the housing policies, maybe environmental protection laws could have backfired for you guys? And how do you move forward from there?
Well, I suppose credit to Labor on a pretty concerted disinformation campaign, and I suppose there's lessons for us in that. We saw Labor's pretend solutions to a housing crisis, and we desperately tried to make them better. And I want to credit, Max for the work he did in pressing back on Labor. And if it hadn't been for his incredible work, we would not have got some $3.5 billion to actually invest in public and social housing last Parliament. Now, in some ways, that kind of hurt us politically, because then Labor could actually point to something that had been done. But none of that would have happened without Greens' pressure. And then we find that action that we took, desperately trying to have, legislation that would actually make a difference, and holding it up so as we could try and make a difference, that then gets weaponised against us by Labor for trying to stand up for renters and people with no homes. So I suppose there are lessons there. We should expect our opponents to be ruthless. We should think clearly about, if the government of the day wants to make a terrible mistake and have pretend solutions, well, maybe you just say, OK, that's a pretend solution. It will not work. We articulate why it won't work. We try and make it better. But, don't get in the way of your enemy and your opponent when it's making a mistake sometimes. We desperately tried to make these things better. And I'm proud of the $3.5 billion we got in social and public housing. It wouldn't have happened, but for, I really want to give Max credit, an incredibly brave first-term MP, delivered billions of dollars. But, of course there are lessons to be learned in that.
And David, we've spoken a lot about integrity in politics, the National Anti-Corruption Commission. The Greens will hold the balance of power in the Senate. What's at the top of your list to push the government on in the new term? And will, improving transparency in the NAC be on that list of suggestions or things you'll be trying to do?
Well, making the NAC work, the National Anti-Corruption Commission work, giving Australians confidence that we have an anti-corruption commission that's got integrity itself, that will be hearing referrals fairly and will be abiding by their own laws. Of course, that should be a priority for us. But, I come back to those core elements that we talk about. A government that's transparent, a government with integrity, a government that people can trust. Like that's a kind of base we need to build to keep faith in our democracy. But then we need to really get on and tackle those issues. We are in a climate crisis. You can't deny the physics. You can't politic it away. And we absolutely need to address that. Millions of Australians are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. In a country this wealthy, that should not happen. Thankfully now, maybe we will have in this second term with Labor, maybe we'll have the opportunity where we have a government that realises that it has political capital. We're happy to help spend that on addressing some of those absolute fundamental crises. And, our door is open to try and make this Parliament, tackle some of those structural problems in the country. I hope that that's an invitation that Labor accepts.
Senator Shoebridge, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but thank you for speaking with us today.
My pleasure.
Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price's defection to the Liberal Party has been labelled by some insiders as a form of desperate branch stacking by the party's Conservative wing and a way of boosting Angus Taylor's leadership hopes. The Liberal Party is expected to meet on Tuesday to elect a new leader of the opposition and a deputy. Senator Price has brushed off speculation about whether she would put her hand up for a Liberals leadership role, defending her switch from the Nationals party room.
To be quite honest, it is something that I wanted to do from the first time I was elected and, chose at that time that I needed to sit in the National Party room, which was the expectation of me to do so, and serve the people of the Northern Territory from there. Right now, and amongst many of the conversations I have had with those leading up to making this decision, is that extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. I'm led by the many Australians who have supported me and backed me.
To dissect the coalition's resounding defeat in the polls and the battle for the Liberal leadership is Liberal MP Andrew Wallace, who joins me now. How are you, Andrew?
Very well, Olivia. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Now, at the top of the show, we heard news that National Senator Matt Canavan plans to try and launch a leadership challenge against David Littleproud. Can I get your response to that breaking news, please?
I'm hearing it first with you, Olivia, as we speak. I've been at a funeral this afternoon for an LNP stalwart, so that's news to me. So I'll have to digest that one. But we're living in a very fluid environment. What can I say?
The 24-hour news cycle. But OK, well, let's
24-second news cycle at the moment.
All right, well, let's then go back to the election results from Saturday night. So speaking with multiple coalition sources, they say they saw a dramatic drop, I should say, in support from women, especially over the past couple of months. Where do you think the coalition has gone wrong when it comes to appealing to female voters, and what's it going to take to win them back?
Well, look, I think we'd be silly if we didn't have a good stern look at ourselves as a result of the election loss on the weekend. I stood on pre-poll for 2 weeks. I engaged with nearly 2,000 people every day over that time. And I think there was an age demographic issue there. I felt that I was able to engage very, very well with younger men, but not so with younger women. And I think that that's something we need to look at. I don't sort of take that personally, but clearly we're not speaking to young women in particular. It's not just young women, but we certainly need to come up with policies that are attractive to them, and we need to listen to them.
What about a policy that's been pretty effective in the Labor Party? Is it time to implement quotas?
Well, instinctively, look, I think the first question is, everything should be on the table. When we meet back in Canberra, and obviously, not everything is going to be decided next Tuesday apart from the leadership ballot, but I think we need to look at, from the ground up, everything that we're doing. Nothing should be off the table. Instinctively, I'm not a big fan of quotas. I still believe that the best person for the job should get the job. But that said, I do think that we need to keep everything on the table.
All right. And so in terms of having everything on the table, the coalition clearly needs more women and female representation. It's got to improve its communication to those voters as well.
Absolutely. No doubt about that.
So does that mean you'll be backing Susan Lee next week?
Well, look, I'd love to give you that scoop. I am literally and genuinely still undecided. I've spoken with both leadership contenders. I'm also speaking with my colleagues. I think both Susan and Angus bring qualities to the table. But at the end of the day, what I want to see, it's not a factional thing. It's not a left or right thing. It's the Liberal Party needs to elect as its leader someone who is going to unite us and help rebuild us. I think that from my perspective, and I'm happy to share this with you, I've said to both of them that we need to move away from this crazy concept of what I call messianic politics, where you have a leader out the front and it's all about the leader. I think that we need to see a return to traditional Westminster cabinet-style government, and that applies to us in opposition. If the punters don't see that we have depth in our front bench, in our entire party room, then, well, why should they elect us? why should they be satisfied that we're ready to take government? So I do want to see that traditional Westminster cabinet style return.
Okay. And yesterday we heard that Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, she's crossed the floor to join the Liberals, or leaving the junior coalition partner and joining the senior one. What does this mean for the relationship between the Liberals and the Nationals and the broader coalition?
Well, Olivia, John Howard famously said we're a broad church. I do understand that a number of my National Party colleagues might be very upset about this. So I think we need to take stock of that. We need to respect that this is going to come as a shock to them. It has come to a shock to them. They'll be grieving that they've lost one of their own. But I'm a coalitionist. I believe very, very firmly that we can only form government with the National Party by our side and vice versa. The last thing I want to see is this cause a rift between us.
Yeah.
We need to be taking the fight to the Labor Party, the Greens and the Teals, not amongst Conservative politics.
And what's your view? I've spoken with some Liberal sources, and they've raised a question about whether someone who's just joined the party should be fast-tracked into leadership. Where do you sit on that question? Do you think that Jacinta Price needs to earn her stripes first? Because, of course, there's been speculation that she could try and become, for example, Angus Taylor's deputy.
Well, as a matter of principle, Olivia, anybody who is in the Liberal Party room can put their hand up, and that's the way it should be. Whether Jacinta's earned her stripes or not, we don't even know if she's going to put her hand up. I suspect she probably will. Otherwise, why would she have made this move at this point, a couple of days out from a leadership ballot? But I don't know. I don't know what her motivation is. But anybody can put their hand up and, let the party room decide.
Well, on that question, will you be putting your hand up?
No, definitely not. No, those are two jobs that I do not aspire to. I would like to put my hand up for a senior position on the front bench in the Liberal Party. I think I've demonstrated over the last 9 years that I'm a safe set of hands. I've been the former Speaker of the House. I've led many committees, most notably the PJCIS on behalf of the Coalition, the Intelligence and Security Committee.
Yeah.
So I would like to see a role that I can further develop those skills and abilities, but ultimately that'll be a matter for the leader.
Andrew Wallace, thanks so much for your time, and we've now heard your pitch to whoever wins the leadership ballot next week.
Thanks, Olivia. Good on you.
Labor MP Peter Khalil faced a fierce contest in his Melbourne seat of Wills, with the party pouring resources into the contest, which appears to have paid off. After several days of counting, Greens candidate Samantha Ratnam called him yesterday to concede. I spoke with Mr Khalil earlier. Peter Khalil, thanks so much for joining us today. And first of all, congratulations on retaining the seat of Wills. You have just come, though, from the first caucus meeting of the re-elected Albanese term. What was the vibe like in the room?
Well, thank you, Olivia, and good afternoon. It was really a jubilant, wonderful to see so many new members of Parliament in the caucus. 57% women now in our caucus. It's remarkable, and also the diversity of new members from all walks of life, all ethnic and faith backgrounds. It's really, I think, a reflection of modern Australia in our party room, in our caucus, and it's wonderful to see.
Can you peel back the curtain, though, for some of our viewers? Why was Ed Husic and Mark Dreyfus now no longer in the ministry?
Look, Ed and Mark have made excellent, terrific contributions to the Cabinet and to their communities. The caucus makes a democratic process. We decide on it collectively. The Prime Minister determines all the portfolios. It's an inherently democratic process. It's voted on. And that is what the caucus decided collectively around the new ministry, which we just passed today.
Do you think, though, some of that ugly factional politics tarnishes in a way the beauty of what was a resounding Labor win on Saturday?
Well, it was a great win. There's no doubt about that. As you say, a resounding win, a wonderful win. We have an opportunity now and an obligation, I think, as the Prime Minister has rightly pointed out, to deliver for the Australian people. We have a wonderful vision for the Australian people, a plan. We've delivered a lot in the first term, and now there's an opportunity to do that in the second term to really make a difference to millions of lives. You know, the PM has said this. I think Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, said it. We have a really good problem. We have a lot of talent across our caucus. It's a good problem to have, and obviously there's a lot of people who are making a contribution. But whatever role that we are asked to do, it is a great privilege to represent the Australian people. And I should say, for my electorate of Wills, it is a great privilege and honour to be re-elected and to have the opportunity to continue to represent the wonderful people of Wills. It's such a diverse electorate as well. I have everything except farmland. I mean, literally everything except farmland in my electorate.
But back to the topic at hand just quickly. So former Prime Minister Paul Keating, he's described this as factional thuggery. Do you think that there is a risk when cabinet positions are being decided on factional allegiances rather than merit or performance?
Look, Paul Keating is a great Labor Prime Minister. He's entitled to all of his views. The way that the ministry is selected in our caucus is by caucus. It is an inherently democratic process. People vote in the members of the ministry, which we did in our caucus collectively today. And as the PM said, no one individual is above the collective. We are here in Canberra to actually represent the Australian people, the people that we represent in our communities, and deliver for them every day. And whatever role we play in that, we are there to actually do the work for the people that we represent.
You spoke about diversity and the importance of that in the party. Due to this sort of factional vote now, we've lost the most senior, or you've lost, I should say, the most senior Labor Jewish member of Parliament from the front bench. You've also lost a senior Muslim member. Do you think at a time of global unrest and especially uncertainty in the Middle East, those two members especially made a valuable contribution to Cabinet, and will that be a loss moving forward?
Well, look, as I said, Olivia, they've made a terrific contribution. The process of selecting the ministry is one that is collectively done by our caucus, and that's exactly what happened this morning. And we do have such diversity in our caucus that we are, I think, able to represent and reflect the views of the people that we represent through the policy-making process in our government. That's a good thing. The more perspective you have, the more diversity you have, the better your decision-making. So having more women in the caucus, actually 57%, it's a majority of women in the caucus, and half in the ministry and the cabinet, and having the diversity of views that we have now is really reflective of modern Australia, and that augurs well for our ability to actually deliver for the people that we represent.
You're very plugged in the international security space. The role of Attorney General is pretty important. It's got a broad remit. It's got responsibility for ASIO, the Chief Spy Agency, as well as the Australian Federal Police. Who do you think would be a good person to replace Mark Dreyfus?
That's an interesting question, because you know very well that this is the Prime Minister's responsibility. I'm not going to be, that's well above my pay grade. The Prime Minister has responsibility for choosing the portfolios for his ministry. He'll be going through that process this weekend. And he's the only one that knows that. He's certainly not telling me.
Yeah, but no suggestions then from your end?
No.
Okay,
no commentary on that one.
Let's talk about your campaign in the seat of Wills. So you received a call yesterday from Samantha Ratnam conceding that, you had won. It was a very fierce campaign, wasn't it? Can you tell some of our viewers about your experience on the ground?
It was a very tough campaign. I think there was a lot of challenges that we faced, including my volunteers and my staff, and this has been going on for a couple of years. So, and I think the level of intimidation, harassment, physical intimidation, violence is really unacceptable. I think the vast majority of Australians reject that kind of behaviour in our politics. I think, for us, it was very difficult. For us, I had people, my volunteers and my staff are amazing. Like their integrity, their character, their ability to continue to serve the community, even when they had to evacuate the office so many times, even in the last week of the campaign. Some protesters occupied our roof. The back office staff had to evacuate. They did it several times. They had to do that. And even up until the last day, they were actually set up camp chairs at the polling, pre-poll, and actually serving the community. So they did a terrific job. They should not be made to feel in danger at their place of work. That is just unacceptable. And even at the pre-poll, talking to voters and having people screaming or being abusive and throwing disgusting slurs my way while I'm trying to talk to voters, or blocking me from speaking to people. That's just, I think, very counterproductive, and people reject that. And there has been a repudiation of this kind of behaviour, this kind of tactic. I just will say one last thing, Olivia. Yeah. Our democracy is precious. It is precious, and it's important that we all do everything we can to protect it and enhance it. And I hope that this kind of behaviour is not normalised.
We did see a number of protest tactics over the course of the campaign. I was with both Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese at times, and we saw protesters come and disrupt various press conferences, and a lot of the time they were disguised as journalists and kind of caught them by sort of unawares. Do we need to be rethinking protections for MPs out on the hustings? What's your view on that?
Look, Australia's been blessed in the sense that we've been able to have that great contact, direct contact with the communities that we represent. I would hate to see that diminished. I think what I said earlier about democracy and its importance and our ability to engage with voters, there is an absolute fundamental democratic right to protest. I will protect that every day. Every Australian, every group in Australia has the absolute right to express themselves in protest. Whether you agree or disagree with them, they have that right, and I always defend that. But it is unacceptable when it crosses over into physical harassment, intimidation, violence, vilification based on someone's ethnicity or their faith. And that's what we saw happening a lot. That's unacceptable. It's sanctioned by the law, but I think from a sort of a behaviour, a model of behaviour for society, I think most Australians reject that. And that kind of tactic was repudiated. The politicisation of tragedies around the world, the use of that to try and gain votes, targeting both the government and MPs as if they're responsible for what's going on, and then blaming for that. That, I think, has been repudiated, those tactics. And apart from that, obviously, the kind of aggressiveness that was being displayed, most Australians were really rejecting that, I hope. Yeah.
So you served as the Special Envoy for Social Cohesion. Do you still think that there is a place for that role in Parliament moving forward in this term? Yes,
certainly. I mean, obviously, it's up to the Prime Minister how he manages his portfolios and what goes forward. But I think social cohesion is so precious in our society. We have this amazing multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-faith society which works in Australia. It really does. And it's worked for decades. And it's worked for decades not just because of the laws or the bipartisanship. It's worked because people have committed or invested into the idea that we can all come from all sorts of places around the world, have all sorts of different faiths or no faith. We can have all walks of life and backgrounds, but we can actually disagree with each other and navigate our difference peacefully.
The Lebanese Muslim Association says the dumping of Ed Husic sends the wrong message. Has Labor let down some of the Muslim voters that voted them in and have secured them a second term?
Well, I mean, there is a lot of work that we've done in engaging with not just the Lebanese Australian community, but the broader Muslim Australian community. I know I've done that in my electorate and listening to what has been very deep pain and anguish that many people have experienced, particularly with what the terrible loss of life that we've seen in Gaza and other parts of the world, like the Sudan civil war and the Rohingya Muslims who have been killed in Myanmar as well. I mean, so being a good MP is about listening, reflecting back those views into government, which I've tried to do by engaging with the imams, with the schools in my community, the community centres, the teachers, the students, listening to that pain and really reflecting it back, and then working on policies that actually support those communities and work within our government, what we can do internationally to support humanitarian aid, for example. And so there's a lot of work to do on that in that space, and I think we have the opportunity now to engage and continue that work in representing those communities.
Can you understand why they're upset, though?
Well, look, there are a number of a couple of Muslim Australians in our caucus. I said it's a very diverse caucus in the ministry. So, engaging with those communities is something that I've done for my community quite extensively, and there's always the room for improvement to listen, to reflect those views back into government, and that's what my responsibility is to my community.
And just lastly, who are you happier to see go, Peter Dutton or Adam Bandt?
Look, I don't celebrate anyone's misfortune. In fact, I think it's important to note that politics is a very cruel, sometimes cruel, unforgiving vocation, if you want to call it that, career. It is very tough. People make sacrifices to serve their community. We may disagree. I disagree vehemently with Peter Dutton and Adam Bant on a whole range of policy areas. I disagree with the way they do things. But I respect the fact that people put their hand up to serve their constituents, and I wish them all the very, very best.
Peter Khalil, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Cheers.
To unpack the week that was is Britt Levinson from the Canberra Times and our very own Shalila Medora. Thanks so much for joining me today. It's good to have the girl gang here. Let's start first with the coalition. There's been plenty of finger pointing since their resounding defeat. There's been blame laid on poor polling, a sloppy policy process, for example. Where do you think they go from here, and who are you hearing that will be the most likely winner out of that leadership ballot next week?
Yeah, so Liv, there's two contenders that have sort of emerged as the front runners to be the leaders of the Liberals. So you have Susan Lee, the deputy leader at the moment, and Angus Taylor, the shadow treasurer, and both have released statements today saying that yes, they are going to contend leadership and sort of giving a little pitch as to why they should be given the top job. They almost look like job applications. Susan Lee admitted that the party got it wrong and that women and younger Australians felt neglected by the Liberals. She talked about the need to listen to Australians, take a fresh approach. Angus Taylor talked about wanting to modernise the Liberal Party rather and unite it, and talked again about the need for more women in the party. So these are the two front runners, and we can expect a decision on that in a couple of days by the sounds of it.
And Shalila, the loss of the women vote, it was such a glaring issue. Just speaking with Liberal sources, they sort of saw that particular vote fall off a cliff, especially around the Trump inauguration. It just continued to decline from there. When do you think that they're going to introduce quotas, if at all? I tried to get an answer from Andrew Wallace earlier, and he says it's still not his preference to do that. But do you think it's time now to consider that as an option?
It's certainly been something that Liberals themselves have been talking about internally, and I know there's been a push from former frontbencher Simon Birmingham, who's really been leading the charge on that. But I think the women's vote goes deeper than quotas. I think it goes to the issues that the coalition have been promoting. If you look at Labor's campaign, they ran really heavily on women's health. They ran really heavily on, issues that relate to women very personally. And yet the coalition on the other side of things, you heard Peter Dutton get asked about how work from home would affect women, and he said, women can job share. It was really tone deaf in a lot of the ways that it came across. And when asked specifically what are your policies around women, the coalition would often point to things like, oh, well, tax relief affects women drive, therefore. And they kind of use these very broad, general policies and said that they're going to target women in a certain way. Whereas the coalition, whereas Labor were really smart with the way they sort of targeted things like health and other issues that are very close to women that we know that women really vote on. So I think it goes deeper than quotas. I think the party really needs to look into itself very deeply and what it stands for and in the way it promotes a lot of those policies.
And Britt, we've seen yesterday that sort of bombshell news that Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price has defected from the Nationals to the Liberals. How do you think that shake-up is going to impact the coalition's internal dynamics?
Yeah, that was really interesting. And, she has the choice being in the Country Liberal Party, whether she goes with the Liberals or the Nationals. And she says the Liberals sort of align better with her and she's seen an opportunity and gone for it. I think the biggest shake-up will be whether the rumours are true that she will sort of contest the deputy leadership under Angus Taylor. A lot of people internally are saying that that's not the right move. It would sort of take it too far to the right for the Liberal Party in a time when a lot of people internally and externally as well say that they should be moving more to the centre, particularly in the wake of Peter Dutton's defeat.
Don't you think it's kind of wild that we have this situation where the Liberal Party and the coalition looked at its loss and went, maybe we need to go more to the right. Maybe that's what will appeal to people. And there's definitely a section within the coalition that thinks that. And it's kind of crazy to me that that's what they take away from those results.
And totally. And I feel like at the moment you've got this sort of split within the coalition more broadly. I mean, at the top of the show we heard that David Littleproud's leadership is under threat, so National Senator Matt Canavan will try and launch a spill against him on Monday. But then you've got this broader questions being asked within the coalition and within the Liberals about how best to move forward, more conservative or more moderate. As we've been sort of discussing there, it doesn't feel like they really did cater to that progressive vote over the course of the campaign.
I mean, you just look at the way or the lack of campaigning in some of those teal seats, which they just wrote off. And frankly, like, they could have potentially positioned themselves to win those seats. Obviously, you know, Kooyong is looking, or has fallen. No, Kooyong's looking likely to fall. We saw Goldstein, but you know, there were other seats that they could have contested if they had the right centrist policies to appeal to those electorates. We saw that a lot of women voters, again, got really turned off by this sort of Trumpian politics, and it's really difficult for Conservative parties to come back from that sort of macho blokey kind of way of campaigning. So I think it was just reflected in their campaigning that they really wrote off those kind of seats that they could have potentially have won.
And Britt, just lastly on the coalition, there was a lot of sloppiness in terms of the policy formation, at least according to coalition sources. There's still questions over whether they'll take, for example, a nuclear forward. What lessons do you think they should take from the campaign and their result when it comes to appealing to a broader section of Australia?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like everyone has said, it's sort of a time for soul searching, and they looked like they were reviewing the 2022 loss. You know, they did a review into that and found where they went wrong, and that should have really been the learning moment for them. But it appears that they, you know, didn't look at those recommendations and actually put anything in place to change that. So I think this is a really pivotal moment for them to look inwardly. You know, the change of leadership is a really important time as well. It's a good opportunity for them to really just shake the whole thing up and sort of, come forward with a coherent plan and start thinking about what the next 3 years looks like, so they're not sort of left to do it at the last minute.
And let's move on to Labor now and some of the factional turmoil that we've seen over the past 24 hours. So the caucus, they've now rubber-stamped the pool of this new ministry that then the PM will go and divvy up and allocate portfolios. What message do you think Labor's sent by dropping Mark Dreyfus, the most senior Jewish MP, but also Ed Husic as well, the former Science and Industry Minister? We've seen, I spoke with a member of the Muslim community during the show, and they're deeply disappointed by this and just what it says about representation. What do you think?
I think for a party that touts diversity, it needs to put its money where its mouth is. We had a lot of very young, fresh faces that came through this time around. A lot of them were diverse Australians. The women, you know, the number of women who have now been elected to the Labor Party outnumbers men. Where are they? I'd like to see the Labor Party really stand by what it says it does and stands by what it says it is, by reflecting the diversity of its own candidates and reflecting the diversity of the community. And I think that's going to be their challenge when they determine the ministry.
And Britt, we've now seen that they've got more than 50% of female representation in caucus. They're particularly pleased about that. They were speaking about that today. Do you think that this factional infighting and jostling that we've seen today, I guess that ugliness takes away from the beauty of some of these other achievements?
Yeah, I think it certainly has the potential to, but I think the way that the Prime Minister's sort of been handling that today, you know, really that sort of energetic scenes we saw from the Labor caucus, I think he's doing his best to make sure that that is happening, you know, in the sidelines. He's not trying to involve himself too much with that. And I think as well, the 50% female representation is then something he can continue to highlight as the term goes on. So I think he's probably hoping by the time Parliament resumes in July, this will sort of be old news. It will sort of be in the background, and he can you know, focus on his new ministry.
And Shalila, we'll just turn to the Greens now. So it wasn't the Green slide that they saw in 2022. They've been reduced to one seat now in the House of Representatives. They're going to hold the balance of power in the Senate, though. They've lost the leader, Adam Bant. There has been criticism that perhaps their more hardline stance on certain issues, whether that be the Middle East or, say, blocking housing or in the environment, has backfired on them. What's your sense among your Triple J listeners in terms of what has happened here for the Greens?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I think it goes to prove that when you have a three-cornered contest, then the Greens are going to struggle to get that progressive vote, whereas a lot of those seats that they won in Queensland were between the Liberals and the Greens, and so they got the preferences from Labor. So I think that's an important aspect to highlight when we're looking at those 2022 results. But I do definitely think the Greens now need to look at whether the way they communicate policy appeals to the middle ground. We know that young voters are much more likely than older voters to vote for the Greens. A lot of what they're putting forward is really appealing to younger voters, but as we saw from the election campaign, they need to really be able to vote to target sort of older voters in order to get across the line.
And Britt, just quickly, do you expect the Greens to continue playing ball in the Senate?
Yeah, look, I think that's something that they're going to have to really think about. You know, them. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll have to cut you off there. I didn't realise we were running out of time, but that's afternoon briefing for today. Thanks so much for joining us.